Have you ever wondered how life gets to be so weird and so perfectly suited to its environment? Well, today we're diving into adaptation. It's the invisible hand that sculpts a chameleon to vanish on a leaf and a fish to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. It's the reason for all the incredible, diverse, and just plain bizarre forms of life all around us. So let's get into it. And we're going to start not with a dry definition, but with a mystery. A tiny little drama that plays out every single day, involving a very, very clever fly and its absolute worst nightmare. So let me ask you something. When a predator meets its prey, what do you expect to happen, right? The prey runs for its life, it hides, maybe it fights back. But what if it does something completely and utterly unexpected? Okay, meet our main characters. On the left, we have the jumping spider, a seriously efficient predator. And on the right, the tephritid fly. Now, when this spider gets close, the fly doesn't bolt. Instead, it turns to face the spider, raises its wings, which had these markings that look uncannily like spider legs, and starts waving them around. It's an incredibly bold move. So the big question for scientists was, what is going on here? Is this a brilliant evolved defense, or just some kind of weird coincidence? This is where the real fun starts. You see an observation like that, and it's a puzzle. And for scientists, the best way to solve a puzzle is to take it apart piece by piece with a really carefully designed experiment. So the researchers came up with three main ideas. First off, maybe this whole wing-waving dance has nothing to do with spiders at all. Maybe it's for mating, and any effect on predators is just a fluke. Second possibility, maybe it's a general I'm scary display that works on other predators but not this one. Or third, and this is the really cool one, maybe the fly is mimicking the aggressive threat display of another jumping spider, essentially trying to bluff its attacker into backing down. To figure this out, scientists performed some unbelievably delicate microsurgery. Seriously, they created different groups of flies. They took the tephritid fly's wings and glued them onto a normal housefly. They gave the tephritid fly the housefly's wings. They even cut the fly's own wings off and glued them right back on, just to make sure the glue itself wasn't the issue. The genius here is that this let them separate two crucial things, the wing markings and the waving behavior. Which one mattered to the spider? Or did they both? And the results? They were crystal clear. The only time the jumping spiders backed off was when the fly had both the leg-like markings on its wings and performed the waving motion. A fly with the right wings that didn't wave attacked. A housefly with plain wings that waved attacked. The conclusion was undeniable. It wasn't just the look, and it wasn't just the action. It was the combination. The whole package was the adaptation. So that amazing little experiment gave us our answer. The fly's display is a true adaptation, a specialized tool against a specific threat. But that brings us to the bigger question. What does that word, adaptation, actually mean? And this gets right to the heart of it all. See, evolution has a few different ways it can work, but it is only natural selection, that simple, powerful idea that organisms better suited to their environment tend to survive and reproduce, that actively builds these elegant, functional solutions we call adaptations. Okay, here's the formal definition. An adaptation is just the version of a trait that gives an organism the best shot at surviving and reproducing compared to the other versions floating around in the population. And that last part is key. Evolution isn't about creating the perfect solution out of thin air. It's about favoring the best available option. The fly's spider mimicry isn't necessarily the best defense in the entire universe, but it's the best one it's got, and it works. So, that's one small, incredible story. But when we zoom out, way out, we can see this same process of adaptation painting with a much, much broader brush, creating these huge, awe-inspiring patterns across the entire tree of life. First up, we have divergence. This is when species that share a common ancestor evolve away from each other to fit into different lifestyles. I mean, just look at this. All these birds came from a common ancestor, but natural selection has shaped them into a tiny hovering hummingbird, a giant flightless ostrich, and a penguin that basically flies through the water. Same starting point, wildly different results. Now, the flip side of that is convergence. Here we have a fish, a mammal, and a bird. They are completely unrelated from totally different branches of the tree of life, yet they've all independently evolved that same sleek, torpedo-like body shape. So why? Well, because that shape is simply the best solution for moving fast through water. And that's what makes convergent evolution such powerful, slam-dunk evidence for natural selection. It shows that when faced with the same physical problem, like the physics of moving through water, evolution will often arrive at the very same elegant solution, no matter where it started from. Now, biologists have some specific terms here, and the differences are subtle, but they're pretty cool. Think of it like this. Convergence is like two total strangers on opposite sides of the world independently inventing the car. Parallelism is more like two cousin car companies, both starting with a similar sedan design and then both independently deciding to add spoilers. And iterative evolution is like one company inventing the hatchback, then the design gets lost, and 50 years later, someone at the same company reinvents it all over again. But here's the thing. Evolution isn't always about building shiny new tools. Sometimes the most fascinating stories are found in the quirks, the leftovers, and the ghosts of adaptations that aren't needed anymore. So take vestigiality. A vestigial structure is basically a leftover, a part that was useful to an organism's ancestors but isn't anymore. Think of the tiny, useless eyes you see on fish that live their entire lives in pitch-black caves, or, the human appendix. If a trait costs energy to build but provides no benefit, selection will favor getting rid of it over time. Okay, now things get even weirder with something called an atavism. This is when an old ancestral trait suddenly pops back up after being gone for millions of years. It's like a genetic ghost, proof that the old DNA blueprints for that trait are still hanging around, just switched off, waiting for a rare glitch to flip them back on. And here are a couple of mind-blowing examples. On the left, a dolphin that was born with hind flippers, a throwback to when its ancestors walked on land. And on the right, the rare occurrence of extra nipples in humans, which tend to follow the milk line of our ancient mammalian ancestors. These aren't new mutations. They are literal echoes of our deep evolutionary past. And finally, there's this really cool concept called a spandrel. In architecture, a spandrel is that triangular space you get between two arches. It wasn't designed on purpose, it's just an unavoidable byproduct of putting arches next to each other. In biology, it's the same idea. It's a trait that exists not because it was selected for, but just as a side effect of some other adaptation. It's a super important reminder that not every single thing in nature is there for a reason. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, terms like convergence or vestigiality or spandrels, they aren't rigid boxes. They are a vocabulary. They're tools that help us read the incredible stories written into the bodies of every living thing and to make sense of evolution's complex, sometimes messy, and endlessly creative process. Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. From the reason you get goosebumps when you're cold or scared, to the hiccups you sometimes just can't get rid of, our own bodies are just full of these evolutionary stories. So the question is, what other echoes of our own deep, deep past are still hiding right there in plain sight?